Hi, Mel. Welcome to the Genetic Genius podcast. I'm so excited to have you as a guest today.
Hey Lulu, I'm so excited to be here. I can't wait to get down into what we're going to talk about today. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, it's going to be such a fun conversation. I'm excited too. Before we jump on in, can you tell the listeners just a little bit about who you are and kind of what you've been doing and your impact on the planet?
Yeah, I've been doing this work for 23 years and it's like I'm an unpacker. So somebody comes to me with their story and I look at their life and, where they were born and their history and what's gone on in their life, physically and emotionally, whether it be a trauma or an illness. And we then look at the why. And the beauty of that is, people live so very unempowered a lot with things happening to them and feeling out of control. And when we begin to unpack it and look at the why and the impact and the purpose that has in your life, it's like sometimes the things that happen to us are like the greatest present that helps us really understand ourselves and gives us a direction to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And we miss it because we're so busy and caught up in, keeping everyone else happy and people pleasing in our roles in the family and our roles at work that we miss the hints that we're given. And, that's what I do with people is to go, okay, let's come back to you and let's work you out and let's work out why. And it's so empowering and I love it. And I've done it for 23 years and I'm just, I've got a little clinic in Australia that I see clients one-on-one. And because of COVID, as you know, I've just started expanding and doing a lot more online and writing some online courses and all of that. So it's actually been a really good year for me to be able to branch out because people want to understand what's going on in their life right now and why they have an illness or what's going on or even the concept that what do you mean diabetes means something in my life or the long-term genetic effect of breast cancer in our family means our whole family's working on a similar emotional issue. And I think kind of when we begin to realize that life becomes a bit more, it's like a treasure hunt, in a way that we get to pull everything apart a little to go, oh, wait, there are clues everywhere. And I didn't know this was a game. Hang on.
Totally. I love that, Mel. I like how you said you're the unpacker, because
Unpacker.
people do come to see alternative health practitioners such as yourself and myself, just,
Yeah.
with a bunch of baggage, right?
Yeah. It's like, and they miss the good bits in it. It's like, no, these grandma undies mean something. They're good.
Right, totally. Yeah, we don't want to miscount, because life is an adventure and we're going to have
Absolutely.
some stones or some bricks or some undies, in the bags that
Yeah.
we still want to be able to use. And as you're talking about, like
Turn into something
identifying.
good.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We never know how they're going to help us along the way. Great.
Absolutely. That could become a flag, grandma's undies. You never know.
Right. Totally. Hashtag grandma undies.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really, I think it's so key when we're talking about health and chronic disease to really, like you said, to just have everything kind of like splayed out on the bed so we can just
Yeah.
identify, because when sometimes something that, especially emotionally, we think can be
Massive.
such, well, we don't realize it that it
We
can
feel
be,
like
right?
such a victim and
Mhm.
so betrayed by life
Mhm.
that we can't find the connection that there's a purposeness in this that we can move forward in it. And I think, that's where we want to move to help people begin to empower themselves by understanding themselves. And that's,
Mhm.
my little key. It's question, understand, empower. So you have to
Mhm.
question why this would happen before
Mhm.
you can understand it properly to then be able to move to that beautiful empowered state where you go, oh, I get it.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, sometimes it's when we actually ask the questions that we're able to dive so much deeper into our
absolutely.
health and wellness. And
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, great. So today we're going to be talking a lot about chronic disease and how, with an emphasis on autoimmune disease and kind of like that aspect and the emotional reasons behind it, which I think is
Behind.
like you the understanding, and you said the questioning, the empowerment, just like really what is the reason behind, because so many people, I think, when they get labeled, in that chronic disease
Absolutely.
state, you know,
Yeah.
then it's like the whys, the reasons all just get shut, like packed up in the
It's
bag on the
just,
shelf.
it's because, yeah, it's because, genetically we have this, or because my body did this,
Mm,
that, and we succumb to that illness controlling us rather than us getting a choice in that situation. And that's the frustrating part, I think. From an emotional perspective, any autoimmune illness, and then of course there's specific reasons for, different ones, but if you think about it, your body is, so everything's literal. So your body is taken over and it's doing something else to what
mm,
you want. If you think about how we live our life, we have a plan of what we want to do, yet life gets in the way. And I have to be a mum or a dad or do a job or be a daughter or look after this person. So I now also don't feel like I'm in control of my life. I'm
mhm.
so busy people pleasing everyone else and putting everyone else first and reaching everyone else's needs, that I'm last or
Totally.
not even on my list. And that's the emotional equivalent to what an autoimmune illness is. And then it gets specific as we address what body part it is. It's fascinating. So that's just
Yeah.
an overall for autoimmune illness.
Right. Yeah. I really appreciate that explanation, because that's kind of how we're going to, like, dive deeper
Yeah.
into that,
Yeah.
because it's almost like the self becomes separated, into it.
100%.
Yeah. And so
It's
being
like your
able,
body's doing its own thing. It's like
right.
emotionally, we're not present in our life. It's, and it's our little soul's way of going, hi, hello, are you here? I
Right.
miss you. I had a plan. I came
Right.
here
What
with a plan.
happened
What are
to
you
my
doing?
grand
Yeah.
plan? Right. You got diverted. Let's get
Yeah.
you back on track.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So, diving into the chronic disease aspect and how it's related to the emotional body. So, what are some of the, like, I don't know, the key points that you can see emotionally when you're working with clients, like when they're in that chronic disease state, what is that disconnection? How does that look like to our listeners when they're thinking about, like, they're listening now, they have this chronic disease state, and they're like, well, I don't know if I'm connected to my emotional body or not. What does that look like?
I think for a lot of people, when you face it, pause for a second, let's go back to when we're super, super little. We
Mhm.
don't have our answers. So
Mm,
when we're little, we grow up with someone else telling us what to do. So we're
mhm,
powerless from when we're born. And as a little kid, we're introduced to the world that everyone else knows better than us,
mm,
particularly in a hierarchy, on earth that I call it. So we've got, a doctor will make you better, your mum will make you better,
mhm,
someone else knows more than what you know. So we
mhm,
then, even though we're in our body, we're not listening to our body.
mm,
So even though we might eat, say, gluten and we
mhm,
feel sick, we're actually
mhm,
not present to know that, wow, every time I eat that, I really feel sick when
mhm,
I eat that.
mhm,
So we just don't realize. And so, or dairy, or, some people with meat, or some people with, different grains, or, fructose intolerance and all this. So even when
mhm.
people ovulate, we don't realize what our body's doing. We're not in tune with our body.
Right.
And I think if we, and this is my why, I go all the way back to the beginning of this and undoing belief systems and undoing the point that we're not present in our life. And I think
Mhm,
that starts all the way back when we're little kids, because we're
mhm,
told, I'll fix it for you, I'll do this for you, I'll do that for you, or the doctor knows the answer, or the naturopath knows the answer, or someone else knows the answer. And
mhm,
it's not, we're not in the journey where someone's telling us, and that's introducing us to be part of the journey. And that's the beauty of being a naturopath, because it's like, what are your signs and symptoms? Tell me what's going on with you.
right.
And we begin to listen. And, a lot of people that come to see me have been through medical, and again, not disrespecting anyone in the medical profession, because
Mhm,
we're all here to help people
right.
and to help people find their answers. But often, and I know my dad, he's 78 and he's been through, different illnesses, but everyone looks at one thing. So
Mm,
this is the lung person, or this is the liver person, or this is the kidney person, but no one puts them together. And it's
mhm,
like, oh, wait, kidneys relate to, lungs, which relate to your blood, which relate to, and when we become a big picture, it's super interesting. So let me get back to answering your question. It's the ability to listen to what's going on in our bodies that I think we get disconnected from. And instead of embracing it, we're angry at it and we
Mm,
suppress it. So if I have this, if I can't breathe properly, I'll take Ventolin. Or,
mhm,
if I have stomach cramps, I'll take like a Buscopan or something. If
mhm,
I have a headache, I'll take Panadol.
mhm.
And, but we haven't got to the cause of, where it is. And a cause often is a combination of everything. And
Right.
it's being able to let that pop up to the surface. And when you start asking questions to people, they know the answers. They
Mhm.
really genuinely know what's going on with themselves, but no one's ever taken the time to listen to them.
Mm.
And so it's letting them be heard as well, I think is super important.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And especially, connection back to that childhood aspect is so key
Mm,
because, it's almost for a lot of situations that power is taken away from the child.
absolutely.
It's like, I want to be doing this, but, oh, you
Yeah.
can't, no, no, no.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're
Mhm.
discredited for having an
Yeah.
answer. You wouldn't
Right.
know, I know better. And so
Right.
that
Totally.
so we grow up and, we're adult now, but that's our base. So it's introducing us into that, hang on, let's reassess this whole situation.
Hmm.
Yes, you do. What do you think? Let's be part of this. What's going on?
Hmm.
And then when you start getting hints like, say diabetes is all about feeling out of control and I can't control stuff in my
Right.
life.
Yeah.
And when you pull that apart, people with diabetes are like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And it's like
A
my
light
dad
bulb
had
goes off.
diabetes. Yeah.
Hmm.
And you all of a sudden become reconnected with yourself.
Hmm.
And that's the beauty of doing this work. Now, look,
Hmm.
some illnesses, as you know, are managed as
Hmm.
opposed to cured.
Right.
And that's okay too, because it's just part of us getting the best out of,
Hmm.
ourselves and our
Yeah.
time here. So, sometimes we don't magically cure things, but we live from a perspective where we feel empowered, and that's a much nicer place to live from.
Right. And sometimes the illness can bring an awareness to an aspect of our lives that needed
Absolutely.
so much healing. And then we're able to move through it and become a completely different person. I think that really happens with most of my chronic ill patients anyway, is that when we're working through the healing
Yeah.
process, they like when they come out on the other end, they're like, well, I don't even remember one, who I was,
Yeah.
and then two,
Correct.
they can't even relate to who they are anymore because they're just completely different. And that's, I think, what you were talking about, that emotional
Yeah.
component.
I so agree. It's like, let's have a look at chronic fatigue, which
Hmm.
is a massive, you know, imposition on people's lives when it gets, because it can shut your whole life down.
Hmm.
And years ago, cancer used to change people's lives so dramatically that they stopped everything and reassessed everything. But the treatment for cancer has become so much more quick. Someone's
Right.
diagnosed and their treatment. So there's no pause or thinking time in a sense. And
Right.
again,
Or
not,
reflection.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, correct. But when you look at chronic fatigue or an illness like fibromyalgia or one of these long-term, autoimmune physical pain illness,
Hmm.
um, people don't have answers yet. We're
Right.
still trying to discover what's going on. So from an emotional perspective, if we look at what happens to you when you have chronic fatigue, because it's on the outside of your body,
Hmm.
people can't see it. You know it, but people
Right.
can't see it. So that, what do you mean you can't come for Christmas dinner? And
Right.
you're
You're
like,
tired? What do you mean you're tired?
yeah, just have some sleep. Like what? Just eat some better food. Like, and
Hmm.
all the answers that go with that, because we
Right.
don't, we can't tell how someone else feels. Now the beauty of that and the hardness of that is this person continuously feels not believed, dismissed, no
Mm.
one is on their side, no one's supporting them. At the same time that happens, they start to believe themselves. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter that you think I can't come. I know I can't come. I have to actually stop trying to do it all because I physically can't. And
Hmm.
when you physically can't, the person on your team becomes you
Right.
and
Yeah.
you're back in your life. The minute that you go, I give myself permission to say no,
Hmm.
100% regardless of what, which is, about living without guilt and all of that. I
Yeah.
give myself permission to say no, which means you can have a tantrum, you can, impose upon all your rules upon me, you can be angry at me, but I physically can't do it. Now that's
Hmm.
me being present and owning my life. And chronic fatigue and illnesses in that genre are very much the person coming back to being their own person, to be able to
Mm,
believe themselves, to support themselves, to answer for themselves, to know their truth and not apologize for themselves
mm-hmm.
anymore. And, and you look at that as a society being the way the world is, and that's what we need is people to
Right.
own themselves more and to be like, you know what, I'm not trying to live from keeping you happy. This is what I need and how I feel.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
that's why you go, now it makes sense why we would have so many cases of unexplained autoimmune illnesses
Right.
in the world right now, that we can't make a magic pill to fix it, because
Right.
it's about us, and as we said with autoimmune illness, I'm not present in my life. It
Mm,
comes back to pulling us into our life to be present. And it's
yeah.
actually quite amazing when you look at it that way. And when you
Mhm.
work from that perspective and you go, all right, let's shut the world out. Let's come back to me. What do I want and what do I need? And
Yeah.
that, that beautiful question we've always lived with, and that's the year 2020 for me was, with all my people I work with, is the year of self-awareness.
Mm,
And it's the, what do I want and what do I need
mhm.
question. But the next question that goes with that is, how do I give that to myself?
Mhm.
Now, we've all our life, and we're brought up from being little. What do I want? What do I need? Who gives that to me?
Right.
Do I get that from work? Do I get it from the doctor? Do I get it from my family, my mum, my kids, my whatever? Whereas now the question comes, how do I give that to myself?
Mhm.
That introduces us into our lives and
Yep.
us being a player. We're now a player in this game of life. We've not been in this game of life. We've just been reactive. Like, my mum gets upset about something, so I do something to fix her.
Mhm.
I work because my boss needs, this done, so I'll work until it's done. We're
Right.
reactive. My kids need shoes, so I do an extra shift to get my kids shoes, so
Mhm.
we're not in it, we're reactive to it. All of a sudden, when we answer that question, how do I give this to me? I become my solution.
Yeah.
That's massive. And in
Totally.
illness, that's massive. I become my solution because
Mhm.
I'm beginning to understand why I would have this illness, why I would have diabetes, why I would have, you know, something going on with my body, why I would have, Crohn's or celiac or something. Why do I have that?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
fascinating.
So fascinating. Yeah,
Mhm.
because I think that's a huge piece that's missing
Yeah.
in chronic illness or just in healthcare in general, when people are diagnosed with something, or even if they're not,
Yeah.
if they just label themselves, it's when they're that piece of like asking why is so key to helping them move into that new state of health, which is lost along the
Right.
way.
And the minute you're diagnosed, you feel like a victim, like, I'm never going to get out of
Totally. Yeah,
this.
I don't like
And
labeling patients with
uh,
diagnoses very much.
yeah, and you go down that tunnel of feeling that, I'm all alone and no one, can help me. Whereas
Hmm.
when we do it from a why of, oh, this means something, or what
Right.
else is going on.
Hmm.
And, if you look at, say diabetes, because we use that as an example of
Right.
about control, and there's, of course there's elements, don't walk out the door and go, oh my god, you're a control freak because you have diabetes. there's there's
Right.
elements of everything all tucked into all of this, and it's
Yeah.
simple, it's not complicated, but it's exclusive to that person's story.
Hmm.
And
Totally
you
is.
find, yeah, that person, may have had really dominating parents, or that,
Hmm.
they had a friend that, controlled them, or a partner that they've recently left, or something, that there's been control issues in their life. And it's
Hmm.
not just the illness, it goes back so far, in
Totally.
all different ways. And so then it just gives you insight that you're working on how you can become free here
Hmm.
in your lifestyle and what you do, which sometimes means that you give yourself more choices than
Right.
thinking you just have one.
Yeah.
You know,
Bigger palette with your paintbrush.
absolutely
Hmm.
100%.
Hmm.
So it's starting to see how we can become part of our solution in our healing journey, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, because
Hmm.
it's such a big part of us that we're not whole, we're not all of that, and we're
Yeah.
not allowed to be.
Exactly. And yeah, I really liked how you said, you become one of the players because, it's like a lot of times when patients or people listening are diagnosed, they don't have a say in kind of like what's going on in their health. And I think that's has changed a lot over even just this past year, where people are like, no, I want to really have a say in what's going on with my healthcare. It's really important. And it should be like the most important part of your healthcare team is, you know, you.
It's like even when you go and get test results, you're not given them.
Right.
Someone else keeps them. It's like, where's the balance of power
Right.
here?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a lot of clients I work with anxiety, and you know, and all different ages, from kids all the way, you know, through to, you know, people in their 70s.
Right.
And with anxiety, you know, I've had a few people come in and they've been diagnosed with anxiety, and then, you know, we laugh about the fact that it's like, so you're told that anxiety is something that just will happen. It just randomly comes in your life.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So now you actually have anxiety about getting anxiety.
Yeah, I know, right? It's such a bad circle. It's like a total hamster wheel.
And they're like, oh my God, yes, I do.
Yeah.
And so again, when you pull it apart, and you know, even though it's not an autoimmune illness, I think anxiety is still a chronic, you know, illness and
yeah, it is definitely
position that we suffer with. And when you pull anxiety apart, you're not present in your life. You're in the future of what will happen, what if, why, what's going on, or the past that you can't control.
Right.
So anxiety is about, I'm trying to control something in my life or someone in my life. And why? Because this is my life being present here. Yeah. And of course, we do a lot more work in that space to give people strategies to then be able to come back to, I want something. And it's like, well, I want, even if it's my year 12 exams, I want a good mark. Well, why? What does that mean? And the more you can answer why and pull it back, the more you're like, you know what? I can just deal with the moment.
Exactly.
Instead of panicking and bringing this anxiety with me. You know, I had a young girl yesterday and she couldn't go to work. And she's such a high achiever. She's so beautiful. And she, you know, was so scared going to work. She was vomiting, you know, in the car on the way to work. And so, yeah, bless her. And so we did the same thing and wrote some notes down and put it apart. But it's because she's so capable, she's in a new job that she can't prove to this boss that she's capable until she proves she's capable. You know, whereas if you do a test, you kind of go into the next class with people knowing that you're good at something. You know, with this, you've got there's no benchmark for you. And if you do one thing, you know, wrong or a different way or whatever, then, you know, and so it's when you work out that's, you know, part of what you want, and again, that's a big story. Yeah. Then from there, it means that she can go, you know what, I know I'm capable. That's what matters. And I'm just going to keep working knowing I'm capable. And eventually that will spread everywhere. And then people will know that. But it's not my job to make someone think that, because I can't make her think that. I just have to be that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think, you know, I've seen, and I'm sure it sounds like you have too, seen so much more people suffering from anxiety this year because of
and depression. It's about control.
Totally control. They've lost, you know, the one like hold that they had on, you know, and it's like been completely shook up in their environment.
Absolutely. In my clients, and I've got a Facebook group that I, you know, talk to people in, and I put up, you know, their one rule that they had through COVID and lockdown, they had to put the words "I choose" on their fridge or anywhere else in their house.
Right, like a little sticky note or whatever.
yeah, just a little note, because what happens is when someone else tells you what to do, it's like the same feeling that we have when you're a little kid. I have no power. You tell me when I go to bed. So we react the same. It's like when we're little, we don't like being told what to eat, when to go to bed, who to play with. If you're allowed to go to that.
Told what to do.
Exactly. So emotionally, because we're all about patterns, life, the whole of the world is about patterns. You know, the ocean is about patterns. Right. So we're about patterns. So when you go through back to when we're little, being told what to do and we hate it, you then get into an adulthood and you're told that you can't go to work and you have to work from home and you can't go to the shops and you can't do this. Yeah. We emotionally react like little kids. Right. And we're shitty and we're annoyed and we're angry and we're frustrated, and we take that out on the people at home. And it's, you know, when you're little, you can't choose because someone else is your boss in lots of ways. But that's the difference that we use with people with anxiety and to an extent depression, if you come back to the words I choose, you could
Mm-hmm.
be in lockdown, but you choose what you wear. You choose
Right.
when you get up. You choose
Mm-hmm.
what you eat. You choose if you do your job inside or outside.
Mm-hmm.
You choose if you have a blanket or not. You choose if you wear comfy undies or not. And believe me, comfy undies in lockdown is a thing, you know.
Right. Totally.
Um,
Yeah.
and so many people are dressed like this and stand up in trackies, you know.
Right. Yeah.
It's the
Yeah. The
best.
bottom half you can't see. Totally.
Correct. But it's knowing that we choose that. And
Mm,
when we begin to be present again to our life and go, that's right, I chose that, instead of not being in our life. We're not a
mm-hmm.
player. When we in it and go, yeah, I chose my undies today. I chose my cup of tea. I chose my favorite cup. I chose my lunch. I chose that I sat in the sun when I had my lunch.
Yeah.
You begin to see us being less of a victim and more, it changes the dynamics. And particularly for this year, that's important.
Yeah, completely. And I think that goes back to
Mm.
what you were saying in talking about like a chronic disease in the beginning, is that when you're choosing
Yeah.
your own
Treatment
health
plan.
or treatment plan, it's like when we're
Yeah.
given the choice to, it's empowerment, right? And I think that's the
It's,
key.
it's empowerment. It's like
Yeah.
working with someone to work out why instead of, this just happens to you. Like there's a lot of metaphysical anatomy books that will say,
Mm-hmm.
like sinus is being annoyed. And
Mm-hmm.
so, which is another kind of chronic illness that people have, sinusitis. And
Right.
our body emotionally reacts and produces that when we're annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we think the solution of that, again, going through this victim and us not being part of it, would be, so I have a beautiful example. Years and years ago, my son was doing year 11 and the teacher rang and said, after me saying, have you done your homework? Have you done your homework, as mums do? And he's like, yes, mum, I have, And then I get the phone call, still not handed the maths in. And by the time I got off the phone to her, I'm like, my sinus, so right side of your body is male and
Mm-hmm.
control and work, and left
Right.
side of your body is female, family, and feeling nurtured.
Mm-hmm.
So I get off the phone going, oh my God, my sinus is so painful right
Oh
now.
no.
And I laughed because I thought the solution that we would think, and then I would think before I understood all this stuff would be, if I make him do his homework, my
Mm-hmm.
sinus will go away.
Right.
Which means, so my solution again is that outside in when I'm not being a player.
Yeah.
The solution is you do your homework. But if we come back to us being part of our healing journey and
Mm-hmm.
understanding ourselves, it means I need to do the step further and go, why am I annoyed? Because I'm
Right.
annoyed. That's the
Right.
emotion. I'm so
Right.
annoyed at you.
Yeah.
And when you look at that even a step further, it's like, I'm annoyed because I've got a plan for you. I'm your mum. Here's my plan. You need to go to school, get an education, because it supports you in your future so you can live happily ever after. And I'm annoyed because you're not doing my plan.
Right.
And so when I adjust to that, it's like, oh, okay, I need to actually
He
remember
can have
that.
his own plan a little bit.
He's got his own plan.
Yeah.
And so again, instantly that makes me go, okay, I've reassessed this. I get
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So it's about me, if I understand me, it's about me trying to control the outcome of what happens in the people I love's life and going, I need to actually be more in my life than trying to control their life. It's just
Right.
an interesting little insight. So when we have an illness, people think, oh, that's unfortunate that happened to you. But it's that, yeah, but my why doesn't end with this just happened to me. My why
Right.
has to go, well, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for me? Because that's the key that I think we've missed for a very long time. And that leads us to being empowered.
Right.
And we've not been treating illness from this perspective, in the past. We are now.
No. And I think that's why we're seeing so much more chronic illness, especially in much earlier ages and with women,
Yeah.
it's like we never saw autoimmune disease in the past like 5 years with women in their 20s, and that when that really started happening, I was like, okay, there's a big shift happening.
Something's going on.
Something's going on. Yeah.
And it's trying to wake us up to that. It's like endometriosis, is massive right now, which is, and if you think about it, it's an overgrowth and then a shedding of the lining that's not, it's not contained in where we nurture. It's like gone everywhere because our ability to nurture ourselves, we try and get from everything else outside of us.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
totally
then
makes
it all
sense.
falls apart.
Right.
So when we come back to what does your ability look like to nurture you? They're like,
Mhm.
what? What?
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
I forgot all about me.
Yeah. And genetically, you look at it and their mum did the same and their
Right.
mum did the
Yeah,
same.
all through their history. So
Correct.
important. Yeah, and it's interesting how that especially that self-care theme can be passed on through the genetics, because it's like the overwork
Oh,
or the lack or, whatever it is. It's so easily ingrained through that emotional piece.
yeah, that's exactly right. I think I wrote a quote up, you know, a couple of weeks ago, and it was about the fact that I'm going to tell my children what to do,
Mm,
but I have to show my children what I do. So it's like, and it was about self-judgment and stuff. Like I need to actually stop, using an abusive emotional inside voice towards myself,
mm-hmm.
because that then gets passed on. If I treat myself badly,
Right.
my kids will treat themselves badly,
Yeah.
because even though I don't want them to, they're going to just literally repeat what I do.
Right.
So if I
Yeah.
don't treat myself well, and it's waking up to that, which I think we know now, that it's going, wow, I need to be part of the team that looks after me,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
I want to teach them to be part of the team that looks after them.
Right, teaching them to look after themselves. Yeah, they see the model of a self-care, and then it gets passed on
Correct.
that way. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
totally.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's talk about I know you really have some great programs about guilt and self-judgment, and I'd like to kind
Mm.
of bring that aspect in. We've talked a little bit, but connecting that into the disease piece and just really kind of like honing in. So let's talk about the guilt first and how
Yeah.
that part of it is such an emotional, I don't want to say like barrier, but maybe it is,
Oh, it's like a burden.
like a burden.
Guilt. It's when I started writing online courses, I looked at in all the work that I've done, and I'm like, what's the key thing that's going on? And it's like, we don't listen to ourselves. As we said, we're
Right.
not a player in our life. We don't listen. And the question then becomes, well, not how do we listen to ourselves, but why don't we?
Right.
And the why don't we part is because I'm not allowed to be part of my life. And
Mm.
so when you keep pulling that back, we go back to when you're two, when everyone else tells you what to do. So we think we're not allowed. But at the same time, we then move into when we start getting praised when we're little, it means that someone else, the minute someone says good girl or good boy to you,
Right.
is the minute we go, oh, look, there's love outside of me. Let me get that. And
Right.
so once you're a little kid and you're aware of that, you begin to change your behavior to get that.
Pleasing,
And
the
then
pleaser.
100%, because it feels good. And then if you have a
The
sibling,
reward.
bless my brother, you throw your brother under the bus because you want all the love. So,
Right.
yeah, so you'll be, and so then we enter this world of hierarchy that we put people down because,
Mhm.
we want all the love, but then the love isn't our love. It's all dependent on what people think of us. And
Right.
so we lose ourselves in that part.
Mhm.
And so when it comes back to the first reason of why we're not in our life, it's because if I choose to be in my life, then someone says, oh, gosh, look at you doing that for you. Oh, I've
Mm.
never done stuff like that. So with guilt comes we're not allowed to be selfish.
Oh
The
yeah.
minute that we're a little kid, and it's the word that stops us, if you're called selfish, it's the undoing. It
Mm.
blocks us. The minute someone says, oh, you do that for you, makes me go, I can't get any love. If you think I'm selfish, you're all going to judge me that I'm all in my life for me. So
Right.
I'm now going to, so selfish means I'm going to prove to the world I'm not in my life. So
Mm.
I'm going to sacrifice myself. This is the key with selfish. You
Yeah.
sacrifice myself. So I'll be last. I won't eat. Doesn't matter about me. Don't worry about me. I've got it. Don't worry. It's fine.
Right.
Now, the minute I keep doing that, and I have a cute little analogy story. If you've got time, I can give you a little story on that if you
Oh yeah.
like.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. So it's like, imagine you're a little kid in a prep classroom
Mm-hmm.
and you're all sitting on the mat, and in walks a lady and she's like, oh my God, beautiful kids, I've made you all chocolate muffins today. And so she has these warm delicious smelling chocolate muffins,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever muffin you like if you don't like chocolate. And she begins to hand them out to the kids. And she's like, one for you, one for you, one for you, one for you. And she gets to you and she looks you up and down and she bypasses you. And she
Oh.
to the next little kid, one for you, one for you, one for you. And she finishes and then she walks out and she says, okay, so I'm done. Bye. Have a good day. How do you feel? You're sitting on the ground, muffinless.
Muffinless, no muffin.
Muffinless. And for that, you look at it and you go, that's not fair. I want a muffin.
Right.
It's traumatizing. Like, we all want a muffin. This is how we treat ourselves on earth. We give everyone else a muffin, but we don't give ourselves
Exclude
anything.
ourselves.
Yeah. So, and we get so used to excluding it ourselves that we don't think it matters.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, the feeling that you have as that little kid sitting on the floor that didn't get a muffin is literally how we feel it every single day, but we don't acknowledge it.
Right.
But, you know, when I sacrifice myself because, oh, don't worry, I don't want that, I don't know, cup of tea, or I don't want whatever, I feel that, but I pretend I don't.
Right.
Because I want everyone else to love me.
Yeah, the armor.
That's what locks us into not being able to move guilt on, you know, because we can't move sacrificing ourselves on because we don't want people to think we're selfish. Now that all of that means I'm not in my life.
Right.
When I undo that and I come back to going, do you know what? I actually want a muffin. I want a muffin. I want to be one of the people I love. I want to be on the board in this game. It means that we begin to turn guilt into being able to say no.
Right.
And then we go into like, well, if I want to be able to say no, I have to turn it into how, because you're going to have a tantrum. The minute I say, I can't take you, drive you, come to whatever you want, you're going to emotionally react and throw all that. How dare you? You're such a bad friend. I'm going to write you out of the will, all that stuff.
Right. Create the monsters around you.
Correct. So now when you look at that from a physical point of view, guilt, that feeling of guilt, we carry it in our body. Guilt actually from a metaphysical anatomy stays in your large intestine. So large intestine is grief and guilt. Now grief and guilt are best friends because when I'm guilty, I'm grieving for me. If guilt makes a decision in my life, I'm now grieving for me because I'm not actually in my life. I'm not living how I want to live. And then we're sad. And this is one of the reasons why we're so powerless in our ability to change it, is because I'm scared that you might think I'm selfish. And so it does that to become, I'm self-aware. I actually want stuff. I need to be in my life for me to get better, for me to have a say, for me to not feel bad all the time, for me to not be manipulated by what you think. So that's why I started with, you know, live without guilt. And it becomes that we then move it into, you know, a creative learning process. It means by me saying no, I'm teaching you that you can drive yourself, you can wait, you can get someone else to help you. There's more than one option. I'm not it.
Right. Lots of other different paths.
And I'm also allowed, because I don't need you to be the one that loves me if I begin to love me. So it gives me space now to be able to make decisions. Now, that's a massive part in our healing journey, because we're in our life now.
Right. Yeah.
And then it moves into the next part was, all right, so now I'm going to give myself permission to listen to myself. Let's start listening to ourselves. When the live without self-judgment came up, because if you honestly wrote down what you said to yourself from the moment you got up to tea time, and then you know, made a cuppa and you rang your girlfriend and you said, so the person I'm in a relationship with said this to me today, your best friend would go, get out.
You're fired.
Get out of that relationship. That's abusive. Like, you are in an abusive relationship. And you look at it, you go, oh my God, that's me to me. I'm in an abusive relationship with myself.
Yeah.
I want everyone else to love me. How can we heal when we're in an abusive relationship with ourselves?
Right.
So
not very well.
We stay in that victim place all the time and we're unaware. So that's why we move on to that live without, you know, self-judgment, because it comes back to, what if I turned that round to be like, I'm allowed to be me. I'm allowed to do things differently. I'm allowed to see the world the way I want. I'm going to give myself permission to do it my way.
Mm-hmm.
regardless, guilt free,
Right.
and
Yeah.
now it all starts to become part of the way we move into becoming empowered.
Mm-hmm.
But before we do that, we stay in that, that victim, which is the same feeling when you're chronically ill,
Right.
that you feel like there's no way out, and you can't help yourself. People just keep
Mm-hmm.
giving you, the solution, but it's not the solution. And it's not because it doesn't feel right,
Right.
but you're not allowed to say anything because you're not the expert.
Yeah, you like boxed yourself in.
Yeah. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
when naturopathy and stuff, when we use homeopathics,
Mm-hmm.
it's why, because that works such on an emotional level as well.
Totally.
It's so variant in what we use to treat people. And it's so important, to be able to backtrack everything in their life and what they're working on, because then the specific solution will come up, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to, it's like, in the medical profession, we have an antibiotic for an illness, but
Right.
it's like, yeah, but what caused that? If it's on your foot, it means something different to in your lungs. That means something different to in your ear.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's such a different place to work from, because we're looking
Mm-hmm.
at the whole being, not just the sign or the symptom that happened.
Right. Yeah. A plus B does not always equal C.
No.
Yeah. Totally changes all the time. And when we look at C as the answer, everything just kind of falls into that. Like you said, it's just like the same repeating pattern, instead of
Yeah,
looking like,
correct.
oh, maybe A plus B is Z.
Yeah, it's like, oh, look.
Right. I can have a totally different answer. Yeah. So I think that's so empowering what you're talking about, coming, learning, just identifying that guilt piece is so key for
Yeah,
identifying where the chronic illness is stemming from, and it all comes from within. And I think that's another thing we were talking about earlier, is like that labeling. It allows people to, like, okay, if they have this, they're X'd with this diagnosis, it has this complete separation from them. So
absolutely.
it changes the way they're like, okay, well, I don't really have to deal with it because somebody's already told me that I'm this, but that doesn't really
Yeah,
have anything to do
correct.
with me.
Or if you look at it another way too, and here's an interesting spin, I suppose, too. Say if you had chronic fatigue, or you had an illness that impacts the family, and a
Hmm.
lot of them do,
Right.
then you feel guilty.
Right. Yeah,
So now I
totally.
feel bad that I'm sick, but I don't know
Right.
how to get better. So
Yeah.
now I've got double
Feel
bad.
worse. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
I
it's
can't be
like
sick.
yeah, it's not my fault because I've got this
Hmm.
illness, but yet I already feel guilty because it impacts now on other people. And
Hmm.
again, it makes it worse, and so we're
Right.
at the bottom of the bottom, and we've got to try and pull it apart even more to be like, hey, you know what, you're actually worthy. Come on, let's work you out.
You can
It's
do
you've
this.
got the yeah.
Yeah.
This isn't, it's not your fault. It's about putting all the puzzle pieces together to get to a point where you look at yourself and you go, or they can look at themselves and go,
Hmm.
wow, I'm interesting. I love me. I'm fascinating. This is such a good story.
I love
You know,
me. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it's hard when we base it on, when we think that we're impacting other people's lives so, negatively.
Right.
Whereas maybe it's not, when we change the perspective a little bit.
Yeah, and I also see with patients in the chronic disease state that they actually use their illness as an excuse for them to, be
Yeah.
in reality, or be, take charge of their own life, or be empowered. It's like they just like, it's a constant circle of like, well, if I'm in this illness, I won't have to change myself. I won't have to do
Yeah.
anything. Won't have to be part of my family. I won't have to
Yeah.
work this job, or,
It's my ticket out
yeah,
to
totally.
be more not present.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, and that's the frustrating thing if you have a
So
partner or
frustrating.
something
Yeah.
that's in that space, because
Hmm.
you want more for them,
Right.
you
We
know.
can't control them, or yeah, it's their
Correct.
destiny. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's reminding people that, there's a reason behind this, or there's a reason why, or
Right.
there's, and I think we get frustrated because we want them to be fixed. So we throw all the solutions at them,
Yeah.
and they're probably exhausted because they've tried all that and more, and it didn't work. So then it creates this rift between people. And plus, now being ill becomes your identity. It's like a trauma
Right. Yeah.
identity.
It's like a
And
badge that they wear on
yeah,
themselves.
I
Hmm.
don't know how to, this is, how people love me now. because
Right.
I'm sick, this is the
Yeah.
way I get love and
Mm-hmm.
looked after, whether it be medical professional, family, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm too scared to leave this space
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know how to get that. I don't know how to give it
Right.
to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not even on the list of people that can give it to me. So I'm too scared to even address any of this because I don't want to get better. And that
Yeah.
emotionally is massive in our bodies.
Yeah,
Massive. Locks it
totally.
in.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting. I'll ask patients when I see them, so what does your vision look like for when you're healthy? And I think that can be such a
Wow.
great place for people to be like,
Such a good
oh,
answer.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
question.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
because people
People
sometimes
are
they
like,
have
what?
no
Oh,
idea.
oh.
Like, oh, I don't know what, I feel ill. I don't know what I want to be, so I'll have
Yeah,
them do
imagine if you're
work.
pain
Mhm.
free. What would
Right.
happen if you're
Well,
pain
yeah. What if you're
free?
pain
Wow.
free, or what if you have energy, or, what will that look like in your life? And
Yeah.
they have to spend a lot of time working on that on their own, and coming back to me with some kind of answer, because if
Yeah.
they can't visualize that piece, they're not going to be able to make a shift out of their
And
current
sometimes
state,
too, that's perhaps a worthiness,
Mm-hmm.
that you've gone through in life, that things happen to you. And it's
Mm-hmm.
the worthiness of wanting, you not having guilt if you want more for yourself.
Right.
It's a really interesting triangle, to kind of explore with
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be great to do a massive chat, wouldn't it, with people,
Mm-hmm.
in a group work,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
just go, hey, what, honest and open, like a real talk. What do you think? Like, are you confronted by this? Is it
Mm-hmm.
safer for you to stay ill? Because, it's like, because people don't know their answers. It'll
Right.
be like, well, yes. And it's like, well, why is it safer for you to stay ill
Yeah,
instead of
exactly.
getting better? And they're like, well, I don't know. And it's like, all
Right.
right, well, when you keep pulling that apart, it's like, because, and again, that's how you get love. It's your identity. It's
Mm-hmm.
your safe place is here. So what if we made you your safe place, whether you be ill or not ill? What if we made you and your ability to know yourself and be strong in that space, safe? And then I can
Right.
put you in any situation with any people, with any, in any country, obviously not now because of COVID.
Our
you
virtual
know,
company, a
yeah,
country, I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
virtual
yeah.
country.
But in that, and it's like, you're the one that keeps you safe.
Mm.
Your identity then gets to change. And so
Mm-hmm.
you work on that. It's like, what do you need? And
Right.
then it's like, well, why do you use this to be safe? What,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on? What do you need to do that?
Yeah, totally.
And that's amazing, amazing work, because now we're getting to the real core, and it's different for everyone.
Yeah, it is
So
totally different. Yeah, the individualized
yeah,
journey can be so
yeah.
different in that healing process. I'd love for you to talk about your book. Can you
Oh, my
tell it?
book,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, the Soul Talk, the Earth Walk. Can you tell us a little bit kind of about the process behind the book, the concept, what it's about?
Yeah. When I've done this for 23 years, and I found myself using the same examples to people over
Mm-hmm.
and over and over again. And, a few of my girlfriends were like, you should just write a book. And I was like, oh my God, I should write a book.
Sure, why
And so, yeah,
not?
yeah, 3 years later, but it it's divided into 6 parts. It's about that big. It's like, I don't know, say 200 pages, but it goes into, understanding that we're a soul on earth, and then understanding that it breaks it down almost like it's like the purpose of us being here is
Mm,
for us to understand ourselves. And then
mm,
it goes back to, we're a soul on earth having an experience, and everything that happens to us is a little hint for us to get an insight into ourselves more. And
mm.
then it transfers over to, once we get that concept into, earth. So it's like soul talk is this is the plan, and all that.
Mhm.
And the earth walk part is, now you understand that, and I put you on earth, and then I give you a
Have
mom and a dad. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. 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 Ooh.
fun.
And so now you're trying to understand yourself, and it's like listening to yourself while a massive party's going on with all
Mm,
of this stuff distracting you. And
mhm.
we enter the game of life. And the game
Right.
of life is when we're introduced to cards like the guilt card, and the it's not my fault card, and the all the cards that people play. I'm not responsible. You have all that. Like, when people use words, it's like they use a card, and we then emotionally react. And so our emotional reaction makes a decision.
Yeah.
So my emotional reaction to you, makes me then do what I do next, which is be mean to you or not talk to you or talk to someone else about you. And so it's understanding other people's part in that, but our part in that, so we no longer play the fake game. That's like the fake game of life.
Totally.
The game where we do a circle and everyone emotionally reacts and we try and get everyone else to love us and we climb the ladder to see who's the most successful on earth. And when you die, no one has the head of whatever company when you die. They have loved person of. And it's the ability for us to give ourselves permission to understand our emotional reaction. And so that's the second part of the book. And then it's like, well, how do you do that in a relationship? And you look at, when you meet someone and you both love each other so much that you want to do everything for the other person. So you do. And then however long after that, because you loved me, I didn't love me, but now you're busy and you don't. So now we're going to compete. And that's so many relationships.
Right.
And they're like, well, I did this for you, but I did this for you. Well, I did this for you. Well, I stayed up all night and did this. And so now we're pulling
back and forth. Who can do more for the other person? Totally.
Correct. And so it's, looking at how we rework that in our relationships and stuff. So it's a little insight. And there's lots of client examples. So it's this is what happened with a client, and then this is how it makes sense in their life.
Right.
So
well, that sounds great.
It's a good way to do it.
Yeah. And how can the listeners get a copy of the book?
On my website.
Okay.
Mel, it's www.melryan 100%you, and it's the word percent, 100%. It has a link to my Live Without Guilt course. It has a link to my Live Without Self-Judgment course. And then the future courses that I'm going to write, that I'm writing right now. So exciting.
Yeah.
And my book as well has a link to that too.
Wonderful. Well, I'll put all those in the show notes. So listeners, you don't have to remember all that. That'll be all in there. That's how I would love to get a copy of your book. It sounds really fascinating and a great way to kind of have patience to have a different perspective.
Yeah, that's it. It's like changing perception to go, oh, that's why people do that. Oh, I get that now.
Right. Yeah. And
it's the why. It's finding out why.
Yeah, totally. And when we have the different lenses, it's like putting on a different, from going to, I don't know, rose colored glasses, right? Where you're just looking at something with a whole different perspective, and you just step out of that, like, I don't know, not the bad path. I don't like to use that word, but like the blocked path, I guess is a better analogy. And then you move on to the path where like, well, all the possibilities are. You're like, oh, cool. There's a different perspective over here, a different perspective over there.
And I think it's the path where you matter.
Right. Exactly.
As well.
Yeah.
It's like you're allowed to actually enjoy life here. You're allowed to.
The fun path.
And it's, and it's like, let's put all that together so you can live from that place, regardless of what happens in life. Right. And I think that's where we want to be. Yeah. We want a chocolate muffin.
Totally. The chocolate muffin path. Damn it.
Yeah. We want the chocolate muffin.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, thanks, Mel. That was great. One other fun last question for you. If you had all the money and abundance in the world, no limits, what would you do to make the biggest impact on the planet?
Oh, I suppose I've always had a dream to open a wellness center that is a place where people come to, it's like be the genuine version of themselves and explore, like a real safe place to explore, explore their truth and find out their why. And I think I would love to do that. That would be a plan for me.
That sounds great. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's so interesting. That's a question I ask a lot of the guests, and a lot of guests have that same, answer. They're like, I want to have a center, So I think that we're all manifesting this
same. And at the same time, I think that we can have that center regardless of being able to financially support that. Because by doing what we all do together, we're all we're like a room in the center.
Right.
So what you do and what I do, we're still doing it, and we just don't have the physical building. But again, I think I think we're halfway there at least, if not more
Totally.
already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the blessing, that COVID has really allowed for
Yeah.
the planet this year, is for us to just see like, well, healing has a completely different view now, especially from the
Yeah.
alternative perspective, because, we can heal in so many ways without being able to actually physically touch the person,
Oh, absolutely.
and I
And
think
I
that's
think it
we're finding
makes you
that.
more empowered in that space
Mhm.
because, it's like the year of self-awareness. We
Right.
come, actually, I want stuff. Like, what do I
Right.
need? Like,
Yeah.
I'm in my life. And by being, it's the same, like COVID is similar to what we were saying at the start about a chronic illness, when you're in pain or chronic fatigue or something like
Right.
that, that your world shuts down because you
Mhm.
can't, you physically can't. So the smaller your world gets, the more you come into your own to be your own best friend and to look after yourself and to
Right.
do stuff for you and to be your own answer. And if you
Mhm.
look at the similarities, you're like, like chronic fatigue is about becoming self-aware and not apologizing for yourself. You
Exactly.
look at the way the world's gone with COVID, and it's the same. We get smaller and smaller to come into ourselves to now when we emerge, we don't apologize for us anymore. We know what we
Right.
want. We're
Yeah.
stronger in our resilience. And I
Mhm.
love that as a,
Yeah.
as a
As an
positive
outcome.
from this year.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we've had lots of really great positive outcomes, which has been a blessing for the planet for sure.
Yes, so
Yeah.
true. So true.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mel. It's been such a joy to have you on
Pleasure.
the show today. And
Pleasure. Thanks
yeah,
everyone.
you're
Loved
welcome.
it.